that's the hardest part about leadership, because there's no finish line, there's no Super Bowl at the end, there's no trophy. You can have a great moment and then an hour later you can completely stuff something up. So you've got to consistently be working on it and learning and never thinking you know it all.
Hello and welcome back, or welcome to The Messy Middle, a podcast designed for people tired of chasing external methods to resolve our internal messiness. I'm your host, Andrew Horsfield. The purpose of this podcast is to have conversations with leaders and experts in their field who share personal and practical strategies that you can implement to advance your career, company, and life. You can find out more or listen to previous episodes at andrewhorsfield.com/podcast. Nick Maxwell knows a thing or two about leadership. A highly respected player who played 208 games at the Collingwood Footy Club, he was appointed captain in 2008 and led the club to their 15th premiership in 2010. Following his illustrious 208-game AFL career, he transitioned into various leadership roles at the GWS Giants, Rugby League Club Melbourne Storm and the Melbourne Stars in the Big Bash League. Maxie has not just lived a leadership role, but contributed to some of our country's most successful sporting organisations as a leadership advisor. But by his own admission, the science and art of leadership is one Maxie had to work for, learn and develop throughout his entire career, which is one of the things that makes this conversation so compelling. The insights Nick provides are born from the trenches of leadership and advising high-performance coaches, athletes and teams. In our conversation, Maxie shares his own leadership philosophy, how to build high-performing teams and cultures, the role that struggle plays in success, how to balance learning and performing, frameworks he's found useful for motivating people and performance, and so much more. This conversation is about leadership from a man who has lived the role throughout his whole personal and professional life. I hope you enjoy the valuable insights in this conversation with Nick Maxwell. Maxie, welcome to The Messy Middle. It's awesome to have you on. I reckon we've got a stack of ground to cover based on your experience of what you've done on the footy field and then transitioning off. But welcome. It's awesome to have you on.
No, thanks for having me. Absolutely. Yeah, it's always good to chat and reflect on some of the things that you've been involved with, and also helps you, I guess, realign with what your thinking is today moving forward.
Reflecting back on your career, we can often think about the moments that you often revisit. I just wondered, are they the victories or are they the bad defeats, or is it something else altogether? What do you reflect back on and go back to the most?
Yeah, good question. Probably a range of things. For a start, I think it would have been my journey to the AFL. So I had a very different journey in that I wasn't one of the star players growing up. I tried out and missed out on the Geelong Falcons as a 14-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 16-year-old, and then broke my vertebrae in my back in one of the practice matches as a 17-year-old, so I missed out there too. And it wasn't until that fifth year that I got an opportunity and managed to play that whole year out. Ended up training with Port Adelaide and with Hawthorn, but they didn't want me, and then moved to Ballarat for a year to play VFL football in the university and trained with Geelong at the end of that year, and then they didn't want me, and I was lucky enough Collingwood threw me a bone. So I guess the first part of the reflection is that, and having to work through the disappointment and build resilience amongst yourself to work out where you want to go and believe what journey you want to take and the pathway there. Probably beyond that, it goes into just all the individual lessons on becoming a leader and understanding what it was all about. I've captained one team in my life, and it was Collingwood, so I didn't come with a lot of knowledge on what leadership was. So that probably helped me in terms of, I'm not taught through the book, I guess. I'm taught sort of through experience. So for me, you can reflect on a lot of those things and developing that. And then there's probably more specifics around individual games, individual opportunities. I still was only about 2 weeks ago at a luncheon where I was with Nathan Buckley. We were talking in front of a big group, and I spoke about 2007 when we lost the prelim final by a couple of points, and the ball was in our forward line against Geelong, and they obviously went on to win well the next week. And the last goal that was kicked that night was Gary Ablett, and I was on him, and it was on me. I made a mistake in my positioning and my concentration, and cost us a goal and cost us a game. So the reflections of even things like that, where you still remember those as much as you remember the victories, and wanting to make amends and feeling like you let other people down.
One of the reasons I think the conversation is going to be so rich because of that, you mentioned it's not a theoretical view of leadership, it's an in the trenches and a lived experience, which I love about your story. Just before we jump into that version of leadership that you've learned, how did you have that tenacity and resilience and grit and all those characteristics we talk about at a young age? Was it there straight away as a young age? Was it a person close to you or a mentor? Is it something you had to just develop through that experience?
I think it's certainly something I developed. It was something that I had a desire and had a want. And I guess kids these days, you've got social media and 1,000 different TV stations and PlayStations and Xboxes and all that, and I didn't really have any of that. I was just loved playing sport, so particularly football, obviously, and from that perspective, it was just, if this is something you're desperate to do at the highest level, then what do you have to do to get to that point in time? And there is no, I think, so many people, particularly as kids, they just think it's just that straight line to success, whereas we all know that it goes up and down and up and down, and you have good experiences and bad. And it's something you can't really teach. It's hard to teach kids as such, but on reflection, I guess for me, it was something that I desperately wanted to do. So I certainly think it was learned and just built as you went along.
And tell me, I mean, beyond that sort of roar of the stadium and the crowd, can you think about part of your leadership journey that was deeply personal or important to you that really stands out?
I think just about every moment, every relationship is deeply personal to me, and that's probably the type of leader that I'd like to be remembered for, is that I gave everyone my attention as much as I possibly could, and I certainly wouldn't have completely succeeded on that, but that was certainly my ambition. So being able to have someone ring me up and talk about something away from football that they needed support with, and obviously there's stuff around training and games and football itself, but I think I've probably had a pretty good balance in the determination and striving for us to succeed as a team and for individuals to succeed, but at the same time having the balance outside and understanding everyone's different and there's different things going on in their lives, so being there to support them. So probably for me, reflecting, it's more about the relationships I built than the games you won or anything like that.
You explained a little bit about your journey along the way, but in 2008, you're picked up by Collingwood. Previously, in 2008, you're appointed captain. What philosophy did you bring in that moment as leader and transitioning into that space, and how did that evolve? From when you were appointed to growing into that leadership role over the years.
I think probably at the start, I was as shocked as anyone. I didn't think that I was going to be the captain of the club or anything. So it was probably more trying to be collaborative and bringing people along and understanding everyone else's perspective. I think I probably maintained that the whole way through. But the more you live something, the more experience you get, then obviously the more knowledge and understanding of what needs to happen next. So for me, it started that way, and then you start to understand what's important, where your attention needs to be, where it doesn't need to be, just as importantly. So that was sort of something that I guess you develop the longer you go on. And I feel like I've always been pretty level in my myself in terms of with disappointments or with highs. You just sort of come back to a very even level person and not get too emotional with things, because if you do, it's hard to make the best decision for the situation if you've got emotions involved in it. So even today, I try to be that level, calm person as much as I possibly can. And it doesn't mean you don't get frustrated. Doesn't mean that you don't have bad days as well. But certainly, I guess that's the goal, to be as level as I possibly can. And that's, again, only through experience that you can be that. You can't be that right from the start.
Yeah, and I suppose it's balancing making the decision, and then if it's a good one, learning from it. But if it's not a good one, learning from it as well, and just then adapting into the next decision you make, or the next interaction, or the way you relate to that person or player or anyone at the club.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's probably now being in business and out of sport. it's one thing you really notice is that sports people are just so used to feedback and actually want feedback because you're always trying to work out how do I better execute that skill, or how do I learn more about that game plan, or how do I learn more about that role. You're getting feedback from millions of people every day, both at games and obviously on social media and that type of thing. But
Yeah.
some are called for, some uncalled for. But at the same time, it's around. You're always seeking feedback, and you're always getting feedback. So I guess from going to business now, it's hard to see that it's not that common compared to what it is in a sporting arena. So that's certainly something you try and over communicate as much as you can.
And is that a hard transition for a professional athlete going into that environment of that constant feedback, constant, support in a way, but also guidance, what to eat, what to recover, when it's quite a structured environment for players to perform at their peak. But then moving into another environment, there's a lot of that's self-regulated. Is that a difficult transition to make?
Yeah, it really is. And a lot of players, for me, it comes back to identity. And I think that so I'm on the board of the Collingwood Past Players, and we're doing a lot of work to try and help not only with transitioning players, but around the education and working with the club to help support them when they're there. But to me, it comes back to identity. So for me, my identity was never AFL player. It was always me as Nick, who was lucky enough to play some AFL football. So I guess my pathway probably created that type of identity, whereas a lot of players who come through and they're the best player in the team and they're 15 and all the way through to 18 and they get drafted. They're always told you're going to play AFL football, you're going to be an AFL footballer. So your whole identity becomes that. And eventually, be it a short career or a long career, it's going to be taken away from you. So you're no longer going to be the AFL player. So that identity sort of stays with the player, and some of them struggle to actually move on from that. So I guess I was lucky in a way that particularly until I was about probably 27 or 28, I was sort of almost fearful of my spot on the list and in the team for the whole way through, because I knew how quickly it'd be taken away from me, and I wasn't one of the superstars. So I guess from that perspective, you're always understanding what else is going on outside of footy and ready for what's next, knowing that your career won't last forever. So for me, it probably wasn't as hard of a transition, but I know for the majority of players, it really is.
Yeah. And one of the things I wanted to just go back to was how you balanced your own game as a player. Obviously, you're a captain, and so there's a whole range of additional roles and responsibilities that come with that. How do you balance, your own game, your own performance, and giving some of those conversations and coffees and coaching conversations and all of those other background things, media commitments, and balance that for yourself? Was there anything you did in particular to manage all of that?
I think the club's always very good on the off-field stuff, like your media commitments and your appearances and all that. They're good at sharing the load. For me, probably the other stuff was part of the role that was sort of mixed in with out there playing, because if I didn't do the extra work understanding the game plan, understanding the opposition, knowing what to look for and how we needed to react as a team and how roles would change within that, then that was part of my role, was to be sort of out there almost coaching on the field to support the senior coach and understanding what they needed. So I guess if I didn't do that, then I wasn't preparing myself for my on-field role. So for me, and that's also been able to connect to players so that out there in the spur of the moment, if I give strong feedback for whatever reason to a player, that they knew I was coming from the right place for the right reasons, because I built relationships with them. So we understood each other, and we knew what was required. So you've got to put in that groundwork. You can't just come in and expect that just because you got a C next to your name that people are going to respect you and that they're going to follow your lead. And I think that can also be a mistake in business, where people can be promoted to a certain position and they just expect that title gives them respect and the people are going to follow them. But it's actually about how you treat people and how you lead. And for me, it was around those relationships.
Can you give us some examples, like how do you do that? I'm thinking about like a leader listening going, look, I'm trying to do that, but I've got 600 things on my plate and there's 400 I'm not getting to. And, there's that constancy and the demand of all the roles that often senior leaders who listen to the podcast would be battling with. Is there any insight you can give them around how you manage it all, and what you mentioned before about what you pay attention to and what you let go?
I think for a start, it's okay to not have all the answers. It's ingrained in us that as leaders, you're supposed to have the answers and you're supposed to know what the solution is to everything. But I quite often just say, I've got no idea what we're doing here. What do we think? What are the options for us? And let's work through it as a group. So obviously, in some circumstances, there are times when you need to be able to step up and go, no, this is what we're doing. But having that collaborative approach and understanding that it's not all up to one person to make the decisions, I think is critical. Once you've acknowledged that, it's then going into, all right, well, what's the priority here? What are the things we really need to focus on? And unfortunately, there's so many distractions in our day-to-day lives that you actually need to be really well planned and prepared. And routine's a big one for me, knowing how I run my day, particularly early on when you're starting out your day, that you can set yourself up and understanding that there's certain things you need to go to and run through that priority list and what's important and what's not important. So handing over responsibility to others is a big one. Being able to see them grow and make mistakes at different stages, but also sharing your knowledge and sharing your journey of what you've been on and what's worked for you and what hasn't worked for you. So that's, I guess, like the All Blacks say, we carve our mistakes into the wall. That's part of leadership, is being able to hand that over and that experience over so that people don't make the same mistakes that you've made.
Yeah, I love the fact that there's an invitation to get other people involved, isn't there? So there's an empowerment and an agency you're giving to people that naturally creates a team, because all of the different voices, opinions can be considered within that mix, as opposed to everyone having to mandate, a certain behaviour that everyone has to follow that might not work for everyone.
Yeah, for sure. And I think part of that is particularly with younger people, actually taking them on your decision-making journey. So if you go, okay, here's the problem, we need to work out a solution. What are the different options and what are the potential ramifications of those decisions? And actually go through that process rather than just, here's the problem, well, why don't we try this? Well, hang on, we're just going to try this and just pick something out. We may have missed the whole pathway to get to that point. So it might end up being right, but more often than not, there's probably going to be a better solution. I think the other thing that has really stayed with me, I got advice from one of my leaders and mentors, in Jeff Walsh. He once said to me, I'm someone who wants to solve the problem and then move on to the next problem as quickly as possible, because that's just sort of me, efficient and wanting to get things done. And he said, quite often the decision that you make for that to solve that problem, you'll have a completely different perspective in an hour's time, in 6 hours' time tomorrow. So if it's something that doesn't have to be made, that decision in the moment, buy yourself some time and actually have a think about it with a clear mind later on, because you'll have a different perspective. So that's certainly something probably 5 or 6 years ago I got that advice, and something that has stayed with me and that I use quite often today.
Yeah, good one. And I think the other aspect that you're communicating around sharing that decision is it's a great way, particularly for younger players or younger people in a team, to understand it's passing of the knowledge, isn't it? I mean, they get that through hanging around the right people, and you can embed that thinking through discussion as opposed to it being up on the wall or barked at by the coach. It's just a really nice way of getting people into the culture.
100%. And I think it's also around, don't just focus on the next step, focus on looking up ahead and how that decision can have ramifications for other elements of the business or for the future. So really simple ways out in the field. If the game plan is for you get to a certain point on the oval to kick the ball in a certain direction, let's say to kick it long down the line, if instead someone kicks a short 45, 25 metres to a contest and the ball turns over, then your defence hasn't been set up because you're all moving up as defenders for the long, expecting the long down the line in that moment. So all of a sudden, your decision to go against the game plan and do something different has ramifications for the whole team and all the decision-making that they're making. So from a business sense, you might make a decision that it's good to do something for your reasons, for your part of the business, but it could be a flow-on effect that affects the other parts of the business that you're not really thinking about because you haven't looked at it from, I guess, a macro level. So understanding that it's not just about the little decisions, it's about how it affects everyone else in the business.
Some people would say you had a lot of different personalities, maybe challenging personalities within your tenure. How did you manage that so successfully in bringing the different personalities and needs into a strong culture?
I think it's a few things. You want to understand every individual and what they want to accomplish and what they want to achieve. So it's knowing how to guide them and support them on that journey for what they want to achieve as an individual and what their goals are, and then how it fits in with the whole team. So you want to celebrate the different personalities, and people will say that we had difficult teammates or staff or coaches, whatever it is, like every organisation, but I just say different rather than difficult. And I think different can be really good, because if we're all the same, it'd be pretty bloody boring if they were all Nick Maxwells in this world. So you need some people with a bit more life and excitement out there, and certainly in different moments to be able to, I guess, help engage with people and help bring energy that you need. So for me, it's understanding or making them understand, this is how we have to do things for a start. And then the other stuff outside of that is when we can actually have a bit more freedom and a bit more flair. So that's the big thing. And so everyone's different. We've got certain things that we have to abide by, that we will abide by as a team. But then outside of that, like, bring your flair, bring your strengths, and go from there.
Yeah, it's a lovely frame, Maxie, in terms of different versus difficult. Really lovely frame for people just to consider. Talking about, I suppose, maybe if I take the difficult part, I mean, a lot of listeners would know about 2010, and some would say the trauma you went through, but at the end, not so much. But, I mean, it's an iconic moment for the footy club around winning a premiership, but also the last drawn final. Thank goodness, if I can put that as a bias into the podcast. I'm interested around, so drawn with St Kilda and then had to replay the game the following week. Can you just take us into, you know, the mindset after the game a little bit, and just how you managed that to get the player group back as a captain for a 1 week turnaround?
Oh, it certainly wasn't just me as a captain. It was our president and our coaches, and everyone played a role in that. So certainly it doesn't just come down to one person. But I think probably for a start, we're out in the field for a long time, and people thought it was because we were negotiating extra time, but it was actually 103,000 people going to the bathroom and actually flooded sewage throughout the rooms. So we couldn't actually go down to the change rooms because they'd taken all the bags out, cleaning it all up. So was certainly not in a great mindset of, like, how did we get to this and how are we going to get back up and do it again. I drove back to the club still in my full playing kit. I got back and actually I heard someone running on the treadmill in our little altitude room, and I opened the door and it was Tarkin Locker and Tyson Goldsack, who were the two emergencies for the game. The third emergency, Nathan Brandon, came into the team for Preston the day before. So you've effectively got the two most disappointed people in the whole list, that they were like this close to being selected in the grand final. The door had been slammed on them, and then all of a sudden the door was ajar again. And they had a chance to play in the grand final again. And I closed that door and just thought, you know what? It's opportunity postponed, not opportunity lost. So it changed the way that I thought about it. We still had exactly the same opportunity going the next week as what we had 6 hours before, wherever it was that the game started. So going and grabbing the boys then and just sort of talking about that it's still exactly the same as what we faced this morning. Only we would have wait an extra week and prepare an extra week. So as I mentioned to them, that no one's going to ever recall how you performed in a drawn grand final if you come out and do your job and we win a premiership next weekend. So remove whatever's happened, because you can't change it. Just focus on what you need to do and play your role, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, and how much of an influence do you think that mindset had of not just getting together, but as you've explained, around that shift of, right, we're at the halfway mark, the game's still there to be won or lost, and we can still influence that, versus maybe going away and not having that direction and clear focus and mindset?
Yeah, it's really hard to answer, I guess, because we don't know the other side of the coin of what might have happened, and who knows? The Saints, I never really spoken to anyone about what messaging they had, but they may have had some great messaging as well. But we just were better on the day. I'm not sure. So yeah, others say that we would have been, if we had played extra time, Saints would have killed us. And I can always say, well, how would you know? We don't know what was going to happen. So look, in the end, I think I'm glad that there's no more draws, because certainly a lot of people that I've met over the years have missed out on going to that grand final the second week because they had weddings or they'd got holidays booked and that type of thing. So I'm glad that it's always going to be decided on the day from now on.
Yeah, I think it's a really great decision that was made. I don't know how long after, and it doesn't quite matter, but it was made after that game as a decision by the AFL, which I think is a terrific decision. The pressure of professional sport can just be unrelenting, and you mentioned before as captain alluding to, everyone's a critic who can play it better or kick it longer or, do things better under pressure than what they're seeing sometimes. How do you deal with that in your playing days, and how do you deal with it now in the roles that you're fulfilling now?
I was really lucky to have a lesson before social media. There was a website, I'm not sure if it's still going, called Big Footy, which was basically Twitter before there was Twitter. And I played about 3 or 4 games, and my roommate was playing for North Melbourne, Jeremy Clayton, and he was sitting on the couch looking at this website when I got home from the game, and I was sort of on a bit of a high. We just had a win, and I was feeling good about myself. And he said, "Geez, this guy hates you." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm just looking on Big Footy." I was like, what the hell's Big Footy? And I sat down next to him, and he was reading this room, and there's a couple of people said, "Oh, Maxwell looks all right. I think he's got a future, et cetera, et cetera." And went down a few, and one guy just said, "Nah, he's no good," and just started teeing off on me. And we kept reading and scanned out a bit further down the page, and someone had said to him, "Well, how did you go on your exams?" And he said, "Oh, no, just your 10 exams. They're not important." And I just started laughing. And oh God, you just never know who is the person on the other side of that keyboard, on that phone. So that was a really early lesson for me that I'm not going to listen to anyone's opinion outside of the ones that I know I need to listen to, who know what my role is, who know the value that I bring to the team, who I trust to challenge me and tell me when I'm not doing the right thing or I'm not good enough or I need to be better. And I think that in any business and in life, it's coming back to what's real and what's important and whose opinions matter and whose opinions don't matter, because you're always going to have critics no matter who you are in any role you've got. So understanding whose voices you want to listen to and which ones you need to block out.
Who's that for you now? Do you have a group of mentors now that you've moved on past footy, and we'll get to what you're doing now, which is really exciting venture that you're leading now. But who gives you that advice and counsel and support now?
Yeah, it just depends on the circumstance, to be honest. I think that you wear so many different hats that you're always looking for advice and looking for different people. So we've got 150 different businesses that work under the Eclat banner. So for us, it's every day you're having conversations with different people who are business owners, and they're going through different things. So you pick their brain and learn from them. And I've certainly got some really key staff and directors and business partners that we have at Eclat that are big supporters and give me different perspective and different thoughts and ideas on how we do things. And then you've also got the people that you catch up with outside who historically have been there for you. That I guess for me, it just depends on what hat you're wearing and what you're trying to achieve. Sometimes it's the wife telling you off for being grumpy when you get home after a long day, and the kids want to kick the footy. So all those things are all part of it for me. So I think it's just, as I said, coming from the sport and having a long career of people giving you advice, you're open to it all the time and always trying to understand what's best. And even when you're asked to do things like this and record your thoughts, and you think of other things that come up, and listen to different podcasts yourself and give you different ideas. So I think if you've got an open mind and you always want to learn, that's a big one. And even when I went to the Melbourne Storm for 6 years, and I ran their leadership program for particularly the emerging leaders. So working with Frank Panisi and Craig Bellamy, they're two people who have just been at the top of their game for so long with the Storm, and their open-mindedness to always trying to be better and always trying to find 1%. Like, they can be forgiven for thinking they know it all with how successful they've been over so long, that they're just always trying to find another little edge and another 1% somewhere. And they certainly instilled that in me from a post-football perspective.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because obviously you've got your own experience, directly with leadership, but then you went out on post your footy career to work with a number of organisations, the Storm being one. What curiosity being one and constantly learning is what you've just mentioned, but what are the other traits that you've seen that make the great leaders and cultures really good?
I think, well, yeah, part of, I guess, the flow-on effect of what I was talking about is also around they don't think they know it all. And I think that certain leaders, you can get to a stage where you've achieved a certain amount of things in your business or in a role that you think there's probably not much more for me to learn here and I know it all, and you want to actually go back with the answers rather than understanding in leadership that's not what it's always about. Sometimes it's about helping others find that pathway to the solution. So even from a Craig Bellamy perspective, many times when I'd throw something up or offer some advice or some thoughts, he could have very easily said, mate, shut up. You're an AFL guy. Don't try and tell me how we should be picking the team or how we should do this or that. He was just always open to the thoughts and the understanding of where I was coming from, and to have that support and that, I guess, belief that no idea is a bad idea. That just sort of came. It was more around perspective. So this is my perspective. This is what I thought. And even Craig would ring me up on a Friday night when he's watching the AFL and go, I just saw this team do this. Why would they be doing that? So even to that point, so the openness of wanting to learn and the, I guess, having an open door policy so you could actually go and just throw things around, I think were really important, and that's helped them succeed, as well as all the regular disciplines around how they run their organisation and what are the non-negotiables. And I think a lot of that comes down to just being a good person and working hard for your role.
How do the really great cultures balance that, particularly if you look at, I mean, it's the same for business, but sport, I think, highlights it a lot more of that, the ability of needing to deliver performance, because that's obviously what helps memberships and job security and fans and marketing and selling kit and all those sort of things that are part of a footy club beyond just, a win and a loss on a Saturday or a Sunday or a Thursday or a Friday now. How does a club culture manage that balance between let's go and deliver a good level of performance versus that curiosity and continual improvement?
I think it's just a part of it. So any good business or any good culture is always looking for how can we do things better. So it's not being satisfied with achieving a certain level. It's always how do we get better? Well, what's today look like getting better? So it sounds corny and it sounds almost unachievable that every day we're trying to get better. But I think it's also, it doesn't have to be a literal thing. It can be just around your mindset of what you want to achieve and where you're going. And as an organisation, having those goals and knowing what you need to do, but at the same time being open to how that can change. So you might have a goal. I'm sure Hawthorn's goal, we're recording now on the eve of finals for 2024, and I'm sure after round 6, was it 5 or 6 losses in a row? I think 6 losses in a row, they weren't thinking we've got to make sure we've got ready for our finals tickets for the first week of finals. So I think it's adapting as you go and adding layers to what you want to achieve in the organisation. I think also the big one for me when you bring it back to leadership, which all flows, sort of everything comes back to leadership, but it all flows back to the things you're talking about. When you're working with, I guess, people to develop their leadership, quite often we set a stage of what the leader is. So this is the lead up here. So I'll use the Melbourne Storm as an example. Cameron Smith, Billy Slater, Cooper Cronk, they were like the 3 captains of the Storm, 3 major leaders, high-profile ones everyone will know. There was others there. But they're also the 3 captains of Queensland, the 3 captains of Australia, effectively. So from a rugby league sense, they were the finished product. That's as good as it gets. You're not going to get better than that. So when I started working with 23, 24-year-olds who the plan was to create a leadership journey for them so that when those 3 big guns and others left, there wouldn't be a big leadership void. For them, if they're looking at who they are at 23, 24 and looking at the finished product, they're going, I can't get there. I'm never going to be that. So I was actually coming down and breaking it down and go, right, this is what leadership looks like for you today. This is a little bit of responsibility, and that is taking the young boys out for breakfast this morning, just checking in on them, seeing how they're going. It might be a next layer might be you're going to present the opposition. So let's go look at some of the clips, work out how they play, and we're going to get used to presenting in front of the whole team. Next one is, and it actually works through little steps. We had 8 guys we started with in that emerging leaders group, and they had 6 of them ended up being NRL captains. One of them ended up being in the leadership group for the All Blacks, and one of them ended up a consistent Melbourne Storm leadership group member. And that's because we broke it down and didn't go, you need to be Cameron Smith, you need to be Cooper Cronk, you need to be Billy Slater. It was more, let's just go on your own journey and go step by step. And eventually those guys obviously had great careers as leaders.
Love that. Do you think we underestimate from an external point of view that small scales, that we, as a general rule, we sort of see that outstanding performance and think that we've got to get there in one big leap and just underestimate that small mindset shift, small active, done consistently?
100%. And that's where, as a leader with experience, the greatest thing you can do is actually talk about your pathway to the people that you're leading. So I think so often we bring people in from outside to try and find some other inspiration, but they're not on my journey. They're on your journey. So they'll hear some stories and hopefully they'll pick up a few things from what I'm talking about. But from a leader's perspective, they want your job. If someone have been in the organisation a long time and you're the CEO, they want your job. So what are the things that fast-tracked you? What are the things that held you back? What are the mistakes you made? And you actually go through and talk about that to them. And then they're like, oh, okay, well, I know I don't have to do that. So it means you do have to give up your time and you do have to give up your wisdom. But isn't that what leadership is? I think. So for me, it's about breaking it all down and looking at those lived experiences because, as I said, the journey they're on, it's yours.
Yeah, I love that, Maxie. I think that's such a great point for people to take notice of. I think I would reflect that experience of people who come to a workshop or a program who are there to learn tend to be passive and they just take the information from the front of the room, where those who are looking to grow look to challenge the information. So how will I apply that? Or that works for me because of this reason. Or I've got to ask a question there because that I need to apply this and I'm not sure how I'll do that in my context. And that creates that thought process that helps the learning, but also allows a person to focus on what they need to the most. It's a really great point.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I appreciate that.
Are there any specific frameworks that you've used, in your experience that help people make that transition from the leadership theory to applying it in life? I mean, you've mentioned one there about just taking some small actions and breaking it down. Is there any others that come to mind that would be helpful for people listening?
I think routine around accountability is a massive one. So quite often you'll hear people talk about meetings. I think that if you're going into a meeting, have a clear agenda and understand what we're here to achieve. Like some meetings are just a catch up, a general catch up, but we'd have my time both as a leader in a leadership group at Collingwood and then going to Melbourne Storm and the Giants, etc. What we'd actually do is have who are the leaders or the emerging leaders that are in this meeting. Let's talk about your role. How did you perform? Let's talk about your communication out in the field. How was that? And they had to rate themselves along all these things. How did you perform in big moments? You might not have had any big moments in that game, but if you did, how did you go? Because it's all about that breaking it down and learning. And then actually going into how was the week? How did we train? Were we prepared for that game? Did we know how the opposition were going to play? Did we have good training sessions, et cetera, et cetera? What are the potential distractions coming up this week? We've got so-and-so's 200th game, so that's going to be different because it's going to be about them. Like we're going to couple of players away on Origin camp, so they're not going to be here. So who's going to fill that void? So actually look and prepare and plan and take the time to do that. And if you do that, then the next week you go back and go, all right, these are the things we talked about last week. How did we go against that? Did we do that? Have you done your job there? You were supposed to go and do this. Did you check in on so-and-so? And you actually work through it so that there's actually consistency about what you do, but then a consistency about the accountability around it. And as I said, it's not life-changing or life or death type things. It's just actually having a routine and having the accountability to follow through. Yeah,
terrific. And most of performance, please correct me if I'm wrong, but they're not the life and death things, are they? They're the small things that then prepare you for that life and death moment, but you're executing the thing that you've done day in, day out for that moment.
Yeah, spot on. I think from a sporting perspective, you are looking at the threats a lot, whether it's upcoming. So what are the potential distractions and things that are coming up? And in business, you tend to react to those things once they happen because everyone's going about their day-to-day roles. You need someone who's actually looking ahead or to take the time to actually go, all right, what if we do lose that client? Or what if we do win that client? Do we have to put on more people? What's the process for that? Who's going to be responsible for that? What's the timeline? How are we going to fulfill that order? Whatever it is, being able to actually look ahead and prepare so that we are thinking about what is on the horizon, not just what's the next step.
Yeah. One of the things I think you were known for was just that calmness and cool under pressure. Is there any insight you can give about how you make those decisions with a calm head and in the chaos of a grand final, and lead others to do the same, to keep things calm and measured and considered when other people may be not and it's required?
Yeah, I think there's probably two things. The first one for me is being prepared, and there's being prepared and there's like being prepared at a really high level. And for me, that was what I was. I feel I always was. So people would often ask, so who was the best player you played on? I had to play on Buddy Franklin one day, and it didn't go well for me. It went very well for Buddy. But it was also, as brilliant as he was, it wasn't just about his brilliance. It was about he knew that Sam Mitchell can kick left foot, right foot, and was sort of a 25 to 30 metre specialist when he kicked. Hodgie usually only went his left foot, and he loved sort of kicking that 40 or 50 metre big, long striking kick. Ruffy would come out and be very upright when he'd kick. So leading wise, he didn't want to hook it around the corners. He was very straight in the way that he positioned his body. So where you led was really important. Cyril could kick it anywhere. He could hook it back over his shoulder or there. So as a left footer, it was really hard to defend. So understanding how the ball was going to come in and where the space would be and wouldn't be, that's what made Buddy so brilliant as well. So for me, knowing your teammates, so I'd spend a lot of time watching the opposition, understanding their game plan, knowing how they entered 50, knowing the weaknesses of players so you could actually be as prepared as you possibly could. So that was the first part. And then the second part was around on the field on the day, was around knowing what's next. So you're moving on from the mistakes. Now even coaching the under-12 this year down at Williamstown. So can we acknowledge straight up that every one of us is going to make a mistake today, right? It's not going to be anyone's fault. We're not going to deliberately do it, but we're going to make a mistake. Let's not make two by dwelling on the first one. As soon as we make it, put it aside, and let's go, what's next? Move on to what's next, and being clear in your mind that you can't change what's happened. If you can have a great moment, you can have a terrible moment, but it's a moment that's already passed, and what's the next moment? So that's the hardest part about leadership is there's no finish line, there's no Super Bowl at the end, there's no trophy. You can have a great moment, and then an hour later you can completely stuff something up. So you've got to consistently be working on it and learning and never thinking you know it all.
We've talked about some of the difficulties with transition, but you're one who's done it really, really well. Tell us about what you're doing now, and tell us about Eclat and you know how that's still stimulating you personally and professionally.
Yeah, CEO of Eclat. So we've got high-end service offices in Hawthorn East, and then meeting rooms and Zoom rooms, phone rooms, all that. And a members-only bar, restaurant, cafe, dining room, and event space, podcast studio. So what we have is we've got a team that basically we're there for members. So there's a lot of there's private offices, but people are here every day. And then we've got memberships for people to be able to sort of float through and use a space as they need to for their individual circumstances. But the big thing we're about is about building a community and connection. So we run intimate events, so sort of maximum 50 people once a week. So we're there for small to medium businesses mostly who want to focus on their business and don't have time to worry about or the resource to be thinking about leadership development stuff for their staff. We'll have leadership stuff. We'll have fun things like wine tastings, Penfolds wine tasting and gin cocktail making and Patrick Yakunawara wine tasting. And then we've had criminal psychologist and cybersecurity expert, Tommy Little, comedian, Harry Moffat, ex-SAS. So you sort of just always bring in different people to have different experiences so that, A, you're building community around the people that we have amongst our Eclat members, which is something that I think since COVID, people have really craved is to be able to rebuild connections and be around people again. A lot of people still don't realise how much they miss it, which is it's funny with some of the conversations I have every day. And then the second part to that is, as I said, for the SMEs that don't have the time or the resource to be thinking, what can I do for my staff? We just put a heap of it on, and they get the opportunity to be part of it all. So that's sort of the bottom line of how we've done it. But obviously, there's a lot of high-end tech stuff around that we do with our app to make sure people can basically order room service to anywhere in the building, to their own office, etc. And then for me, how does it stimulate me? Well, I'm learning every day. So I learn about a different member, about a different business. I make mistakes. I've got to think about different things that I've never had to think about before, obviously coming out of sport. I learn from the staff that I work with and the members that I see every day. So again, the stimulation is probably at a completely new level because I'm learning every day.
And there's an element with the furniture too, the way you've decked it out. I mean, there's a story there for you too, isn't there?
There is, yeah. Jesse Hayes and Mark Miller, who are, Jesse was founder of Eclat, and then Mark formed Design. So between the two of them, they came up with the idea that, well, what if we actually did our own furniture as well? Because we were looking out there and we weren't sort of happy with the standard office furniture. So most of our fit out and all our furniture has been, we basically started a furniture company to bring all that together. So that's a really cool part of it as well, and a good story to sort of show that we're trying to go above and beyond and offer things to our members that no one else out there can offer.
Yeah. Look, we'll obviously put a link in the show notes for people if they want to check it out and have a look. It's a beautiful space, and you've done a tremendous job of what you're creating there, let alone the space, but the community element as well. You mentioned a little bit earlier about we're recording this on the eve of finals, so it would be remiss of me not to ask you, which may be the same answer to this question, but who do you think people should keep an eye out and who do you think's going to win it?
I want to say the Melbourne Storm because I've given up on AFL after Collingwood missed out.
Okay, fair enough. We expect the one-eyedness of your
Correct, yeah.
your perspective.
It's the most even year that I've seen ever, I think. So it'd be really hard to put a line through any team. So I'm going to sit on the fence there and just say go Melbourne Storm.
Great, thanks, Maxie. It's such a great perspective you give. I think I mentioned earlier about, it's definitely leadership from the trenches rather than just theoretical, and you've given a lot for people to think about around, leadership, how they lead other people as well as themselves. So thanks for your time. It's been ripper.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Cheers.
Two quick things before we wrap up. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to access the full list of show notes or explore some other episodes, simply visit andrewhorsfield.com. And please consider forwarding this episode to someone that you think would benefit. It will not only be appreciated by the person you choose, but help spread the word and amplify the impact I'm trying to make for the podcast. Thanks for listening.